Good afternoon and welcome to LLT 180. Hero and, let's try that again. Chicks dig. Good afternoon and welcome to LLT 180, Hero and Quest. In our last exciting class of Hero and Quest, we talked about a few of the basics. We talked about the concept of Catabasis, which is a descent to a real or imagined underworld or afterlife or world of the dead and a return back. The idea is that the hero of a Catabasis is wandering through life, kind of meandering through life, not really achieving their full potential, not really achieving their full purpose, and then they go down to either the world where the dead people really live, or the world someplace like where the dead people really live, and they have a major learning experience of some sort. Sometimes it consists of consulting with famous dead people. Sometimes it consists of seeing people being punished for their crimes. And please don't text, it makes me sad. Or it can be just somebody giving them a great big huge fat object lesson which they may or may not respond to. Ideally, they return from the Catabasis to the world of the living, having somehow been enriched by what they learned on their Catabasis. They return to the world of the living, leading a better life, fulfilling more of their potential than they would have before the Catabasis. And if they share their learning, what they learned on their Catabasis with somebody else, they get +1 for being a culture hero or something like that. I told you last time the story of Odysseus and his men going into the cave of the Cyclops Polyphemus. They were hungry, they were tired, it didn't look like anybody was in the cave, it looked like there were good things to eat and drink. They rushed in there, a couple of them got killed. The only way they got out of the cave was by poking the Cyclops' eye out. They took off running. What did Odysseus learn from this lesson? What should he have learned from his trip in the Cyclops' cave? Somebody volunteer. No, no, no. I need somebody from this side of the room. I love you all dearly. Help me. What should he have learned? Yes?
To break into someone else's place and steal their thing.
Stealing other people's stuff, bad. Very good. That is exactly one of the things he should have learned. And what's another really stupid thing he did? How do we know for a fact that he didn't learn anything? Yeah, go ahead. He gave his name and his address to the Cyclops he just blinded. That's Odysseus, king of Ithaca, 1 Royal Palace, Ithaca, Greece, 65897. That was a bad career move. You do not go out on a road trip and start calling down, telling dirty jokes about the goddess of freeways. Oh, great goddess of freeways, speed me on my humble journey. I offer you the rest of my bag of Andy Capp's cheddar fries. I loves those things, okay? So supposedly Odysseus should have learned something, but he really didn't. That by way of review, we've got a very full class today. We're going to be talking about a few concepts I'm going to be writing up on the board, and I'm going to write them up on the board right here. These are going to be buzzwords which you'll probably see on your test. One is cultural competence. Got to remember to talk about that. This is a German word, Weltanschauung. Repeat after me. Weltanschauung. Weltanschauung. That sounded just horrible. If I were German, I would be so mortally offended, I'd flunk you all and call it a semester. Alter ego is going to be another term we talk about today. probably talk about parable. I'm sure there will be others, but we're going to be dealing with a few important buzzwords here, and we'll start with that. Number one, this will constitute a separate little 5 to 7 minute lecturette. If I do it right, wish me luck. I almost said Southwest Missouri State. At Missouri State University, we have this thing called the Public Affairs Mission. We have a statewide mission in public affairs granted to our institution in 1995 by the Missouri State Legislature and then by then Governor Mel Carnahan. The Public Affairs Mission, as defined by the university, consists of 3 separate areas. One is community engagement. We faculty, the staff, you students are all expected as part of the public affairs mission to go out and try to do something for the good, not just of yourself, but for the community. And I'm really cool with that. I try. I think you should too. That's great. Community engagement is a good thing. Ethical leadership. Supposedly, when the occasion demands, as it will of all of us, sooner or later, maybe no doubt already has, we are called upon to lead. We are called upon to be the go-to person. We are called to be the one who comes up with a plan and the one who makes it happen. Ideally, through the concept of ethical leadership, we're supposed to do this in an ethical manner. That is to say, if I want to go invade Carrington Hall and take it over and install myself as the new president of the university, and you are going to be my troops in doing this, we must do this in an ethical fashion. There will be no hurting of administrators. There will be no hurting of the financial aid people or the bursar. We will definitely not touch a hair on the head of the Res Life people, or...
This is not sounding fun.
No, it's not supposed to be fun, dear. The fact is that we are called upon to behave by the rules that govern civilized behavior. It wasn't really exactly ethical leadership for the Cyclops to, brain the guy who was in his cave. It wasn't ethical, really, of Odysseus to poke his eye out with a red-hot sharp stake. Try to avoid these things. But the number one public affairs topic we'll be treating this semester, and this has to do with general education too, is cultural competence. By cultural competence, I don't just mean knowing our own culture, okay? Let's see, as at least one of you knows in this fine class, that we live in a rapidly globalizing world that is getting ever smaller. We all, no doubt, have friends in different countries we have never met face to face but can't get away with not talking to because we are so close. We are obligated to know something about other people. We are obligated not just to say, well, those people don't look like me and they don't speak my language. They're worse than me. We have to deal with the fact that not everybody is like you. Not everybody is like me. And it's not enough to know the language. It's not enough to know the history. It's all the more important that we know how people think. We know how people feel. We appreciate what we have in common. We appreciate how we're different. Blah, 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 blah. I like that. With the emphasis on blah, blah, blah. Go to the university's public affairs website at publicaffairs.missouristate.edu, and they will explain all of this far better than I humbly could. What I think I can explain to you very effectively is that this idea of cultural competence does not just extend in present time. To be culturally competent, it's not enough to know why it is your friend from Indonesia doesn't have any problem at all with people being Muslim because she is one. Okay, it's not enough to know that in France even the babies speak French. Okay, it is not enough to know, for example, that along the Polish-German border, where my ancestors on my mother's side comes from, there's really no really telling whether you are actually Polish or actually German, because you're actually kind of both. Most of us in this room are in fact descended from King Charlemagne of the Holy Roman Empire. You look around and say, yeah, really? Yeah, really. Cultural competence goes backwards in time. It goes backwards in time to a place where our forefathers and foremothers, foresisters and forehouse pets learned how to live like human beings and developed the structures, the rules, the ethics, the community ways under which we live today. Democracy was not invented on July 4th, 1776. All right, the ancient Greeks were already using democracy in the 700s BC. And the idea of literature, the idea of adventure stories didn't happen when George Lucas was born, okay? The ancients needed entertainment too. The ancients needed to learn lessons too. But in order to fully appreciate, in order to become really culturally competent with the ancient world, I'm going to have to share with you a little bit of gasp history. It's not going to be much, and you can be sure that I will recount it in my own uniquely amusing and yet meaningful way. But I am going to have to drop a small H-bomb on you. I pause for questions. Any questions about cultural competence, about ethical leadership, about, see, now that this isn't really going into the tank, I could go, but it's actually real. Okay. In order to become culturally competent about the ancient world, first of all, and I'm sorry we can't do this today because we're on camera, and if I start messing with Rich's light settings, he's liable to pull the tripod up and bap me over the head with the camera, and I can't say I'd blame him. But what I would like to do is to ask you to try to, oh crap, should I ask them to close their eyes? And close your eyes. I'm closing my eyes too. Rich will tell me who's closing their eyes afterwards. And try to imagine yourself in the year 3000 BC. Okay, now open your eyes up. Again, most of you had opened them. Somebody want to tell me, somebody want to guess. I can lecture. God knows I can lecture. What would life be like in the year 3000 BC? Who said that? Who's me? Bungee jumping. It would be hot?
Yeah.
Oh, most of the day, yes, there's no artificial lighting. It's dark. What else do you want to guess? Use your imaginations, people. Because if we're going to sit around and read and talk about the Gilgamesh epic, you can't identify with what these people lived through. Neither can I. I grew up with artificial light, electricity, running water, telecommunications, internal combustion engine, advanced medicine, life expectancy at birth of about 60 years, going up to about 75 now. I'll probably live forever. Really make a concerted effort to tell me something seriously about what life would be like in 3000 BC. Quiet. Go ahead. Simple. What would be simple about it? I agree, by the way.
Well, there's no technology, so you just have to sit and stare at people and
You could be what? Everybody in 3000 BC, except for the Sumerians and the ancient Egyptians. Life in 4000 BC, life in 3000 BC. Let's talk about how basic we're getting. No outdoor plumbing. Water is something you get from a stream. You get it in small quantities and walk in straight long distances to get it. A man's life expectancy might be 25 or 30. A woman who survives multiple childbirths, half of which will live their first year might live to be about 30. Okay, life is nasty, brutish, and short. Once it gets dark, there is no entertainment. Weather, storms, floods are not caused by cold fronts interchanging with warm air. Pardon? It is the gods and goddesses who rule the universe. And folks, they are not nice people. They don't care about humans. They have nasty personalities. There's no predicting what they're going to do, why they're going to do it, and when. You don't know why your little kid got sick. You don't know what's going to make the little kid better. Okay? You don't know why some people, are rich and some people are poor. You don't know what happens after you die. You don't know anything. The chances are very good that even in the most advanced of ancient civilizations, you will live your entire life within about a mile of the place where you've been born. Okay? Life is pretty much a grim struggle to stay alive. And the gods and goddesses, again, let me remind you, are just like people, only more powerful, immortal, and worse. The term Weltanschauung, zoom in, Weltanschauung, will get you points on tests. It is this really cool German word meaning a world outlook. A world outlook conditioned by when you are born, where you are born, and the circumstances around you. Example being, my parents were born and raised during the Great Depression. They grew up in a time when life was a pretty big, grim struggle to be alive. Electricity was something only the people down the block had, and all bodily functions were done outside, even in the depths of winter. Ask me to tell you about that sometime if you dare. My generation grew up with parents who had been through the Great Depression, who wanted to make life easy for us. Sometimes I think they made life a little bit too easy for us. My parents didn't get the chance to go to college. When I was growing up, there was no question. I could either go to college or I could die. All right? Pardon? College. No. It was all college. Mom and Dad was all college. I wanted to get a job and work, on the railroad when I was a kid. Nope, you're going to college. Your generation never used a typewriter. Probably don't even read books in a library anymore. Don't write letters. How many of you have ever taken a piece of paper, written like a page of something on one side and the other, and then put it in the U.S. mail and sent it to somebody? Okay, good. Give it another 15 years. What's this letter, and what is the post office of which you speak? I guess what I'm trying to suggest to you is that the Weltanschauung of Americans growing up during the Great Depression is of a world, the world outlook is of a world that is a nasty place where the bottom can just drop out any second. So yes, save all the tin foil and rubber bands because you just might need them. Clean your plate and turn that light off or I will bang your head up against the wall. Whatever, okay? If you go back to 3000 BC, to the world where the life expectancy is maybe 25 years, there is no indoor plumbing, no electricity, no artificial lighting, no computers, no iPods, no iPads. These people are going to see the whole world as a whole lot nastier than our wildest dreams. I pause for emphasis and a question, because that's something I can't stress enough. We are brought up, most of us, if not all of us, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, which tells us that the human race and the universe, the world, were created by for a purpose by a loving God who wants good things for human beings. The Mesopotamians had no concept of this whatsoever. They thought it was all a bad joke. Life is nasty, brutish, and short, and then you die, and that sucks even worse. That's the Weltan Shao'ung of 3000 BC Sumerian world. Life is nasty, brutish, and short, and then you die. And that sucks even worse. Questions? Okay, you are going to have to ask me some questions, or else I'm going to start getting upset and lecturing the entire time. Okay. Actually, I want to bring up something else called a metaphor. I think I spoke about metaphor last time. Did I not? Okay, thank you. Now I will. Metaphor is explaining one thing by reference to another. Example, life is just a bowl of cherries. Life is but a dream. What else is life? Oh, Lord, yeah. Life is like a box of chocolates. Why is it like a box of chocolates?
You don't know what you're going to get.
Because you never know what you're going to get. Is there anything else that life is like, or is that what life is really like, a box of chocolates? Your name is? Elena? What is life like? Anybody? Any wisdom of the ages? Like what? Okay, I'll bite. Stuck in a helmet. Life is tough, get a helmet. That's actually a metaphor too, because that is comparing life to war. Good God, you all. What is it good for? Say it. Okay, as long as there are people who can get that reference to War by Edwin Starr, I guess I am not totally senile. Look, here is the very serious point behind what I'm trying to get across to you folks. I'm convinced that the oldest metaphor for life in the entire world is a road. If you think about it, if you think about life in the very simplest of terms, you are either moving somewhere or you are dead. Think about it. You move out from your mother's womb, or sometimes are moved. And if your lungs start to move when you hit the air, you are alive. And you live a while, and when your lungs stop moving and everything else stops moving, then you are dead. It's almost as if to say life is just basically trying to keep some part of yourself in motion for as long as you can. Try to go back again to, say, 3000 BC, where you are destined to spend the great majority of your life, maybe even all of your life, all 25 to 30 years of it that you can expect, within a mile of where you grew up. Man, that's pretty awful. That's pretty awful today. Just think of never moving a mile from, no matter how interesting a place you grew up in, 1 mile radius, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. Multiply that by no indoor plumbing, no artificial light, 25-year life expectancy, a world populated and ruled by angry gods and goddesses. Folks, you are probably desperate to hear any kind of story about any kind of experience that may have happened. Does that make sense? When the single most interesting thing in your life that you can do in the absence of any books, Xbox, fast food restaurants. Oh, there's this just amazing Korean place over in the next village. is to just like go somewhere else just for the sake of being somewhere else. And you go somewhere else for the sake of being somewhere else. You walk for half a day in one direction. You come to another village 5 miles away and you find out it's exactly like the same village you live in, which it probably is. And then you think, well, the sun is in the middle of the sky. Perhaps I should turn around and return to my village so I can get fed. And you hike all the way back. You have just had a great adventure. You have just had more of an adventure than anybody else you know has had in their entire lives. You have had the sort of adventure that your descendants will talk about for years. Your name is? Taylor. My great-grandfather Taylor walked all the way down to Ozark. And then he walked all the way back. That really impresses the ladies. You know, I got my choice of the ladies because I'm descended from the guy who walked to Ozark and walked back. I mean, it's funny, you can chuckle at it. But this is how dead, I almost said ASS, boring the ancient world was. And if by some chance Taylor comes back and starts telling stories about what he saw when he went to Ozark, then we can have some fun. Then we can have some entertainment. But I'm convinced the oldest storyline in the whole book is somebody went somewhere, saw something, did something, and came back. Pause for a question there. Here's my question for the class. Rich, do you have a question? Okay, you can ask questions too. I'm so desperate. These people are so dead, I'll take questions from anybody. Yes, what's your question? Your name is? What is your name? Becky, what's your question? Ask me any question in the whole world. Have you ever been somewhere interesting?
Yes.
Where's the most interesting place you've ever been?
Prague.
Well, then I'll ask you, what's it like to be in Prague? I want to go to Prague.
There's a lot of parties there.
And we have a lot of parties here. What else? I'm just picking on you a little bit. It's really pretty. Are you saying Springfield's not really pretty?
It's prettier there.
What isn't? But, okay, anybody else go any place really interesting? What's your name?
Jackson,
Still Jackson. Okay, Jackson.
Hawaii.
Okay, what's so great about Hawaii?
Really nice.
What's really nice?
Temperature.
No, what is a nice temperature?
60s and 70s.
We have that here.
Not every day.
Yeah, during spring we do.
Not all year.
Gets boring. Anybody else been someplace interesting? We've already wiped out Prague and Hawaii. Yes, what is your name? Elena.
Mexico.
All right. Tell me what's so great about Mexico.
The beaches.
We have beaches here.
Ocean.
I mean, really, if you can see all the way up to the horizon, Elena, it's all wasted past the horizon. You know? I mean, it could be Denver out beyond the horizon and it wouldn't make any difference. Next, somebody on this room, anybody on this side of the room been somewhere interesting? Yeah.
Paris.
Okay, what's so interesting about Paris?
We have a lot of history there that you don't have in Springfield. Like a lot of unique places like Notre Dame, Eiffel Tower.
Church. Towers. Keep going. Okay. Okay, yes, your name is? Still Camille. Okay, go ahead, Still Camille.
Well, no, I was just saying.
Oh, you are Paris.
But I have a question for you. Where have you been that's interesting?
Now, are you going to be a teacher someday?
No, I hope not.
Yeah, it's a life worse than death, let me tell you, you know. I have to go in there and look at it, that I'm a teacher. Oh my God, and that's all I'll ever be. Is my hair okay? Probably the most exciting and terrifying place I ever went to. Or did you just say interesting? No. I would. I'm trying really hard to think. Okay, I can tell you where it was. Probably Butte, Montana. Okay, but let me just state for the record to conclude this little nugget of, intellectual goodness and stuff like that, that the person, Taylor, who has traveled all the way out to Ozark or Nixa and then walks back, they'll get tired of saying, well, yeah, saw some farms, horses, saw some men there and some women, all looked kind of like us, some little kids, they were smaller than the men and the women. And vampires. Vampires? Thinking quickly, Taylor says, oh yeah, vampires all over the place. Playing basketball and, against the werewolves. Werewolves? Pretty soon a crowd starts to gather around Taylor. Tell us about the werewolves. His mind is whirling like a toad. He's thinking, well, they all spoke with British accents. Their hair was perfect, and they and they bit the vampires, and the vampires bit, and pretty soon it was just all knee deep in gore. What's gore? Blood. Here, somebody give him, a bottle of wine and some food to eat, and the babes are just like settling themselves. Oh, Taylor, tell me more about what it was like with the werewolves and the vampires. And all you know is you better come up with some more stuff fast. In my case, my personal Catabasis trip to Butte, Montana works like this. I was driving with the woman who was doomed to become my wife. We were taking a 1987 Hyundai Excel from basically Nashville, Tennessee to Seattle, Washington, for its owner, who had just given birth to a young baby and didn't want to drive it herself. We had just been dating, Moopy and I, for about a year, and I knew that if we were still a couple by the time we got back to Springfield, Missouri, the poor woman was going to have to marry me. We drove 8 hours a day, and then we stopped, because basically the 1987 Hyundai was about as big as this table. And we were doing pretty well, getting pretty interested in everything we saw, until we got to Butte, Montana. And I've been saying ever since, for years, this was 1990, that if the good Lord in his wisdom ever decided to administer an enema to the entire human race, the nozzle would go right in Butte, Montana. We got to the hotel, the one hotel that had rooms. It was called the Thrifty Scott. The rooms at the Thrifty Scott were something like $59 a night back in 1990. I thought, but this is the Thrifty Scott, right? And then Moopy looked at me with a look that said, get the hotel room. Okay, women are born with the ability to give this look, and the smart man recognizes it. We got a hotel room, and I should have known better when the TV was, everything was green. The bed, the walls, the TV, everything was green, but we were starving, so we just went out and got a bite to eat. It turns out that every place you could eat, drink, stop, sleep, or anything in Butte, Montana has slot machines. Even the churches have slot machines. We picked the place that had the least slot machines and tried to eat something, and they started playing Engelbert Humperdinck music over the stereo. Have you ever heard of Engelbert Humperdinck? Yeah. He's kind of, well, I won't get into that. We were so happy to get back in our room and go to sleep until we could hear the copper miners partying in the lounge, which they partied away. And do you want to tell a bunch of drunken copper miners to shut up? No. Finally, they left the bar, and I heard something funny outside our hotel window. One of the copper miners was relieving himself on the side of the 1987 Hyundai. And I thought to myself, ha ha ha, you think you're peeing on my car, but that car actually doesn't belong to me. I'm just trying to drive it to Seattle. Suffice it to say, by the next morning, my beloved Moopy, by the time I had called ahead for a reservation, had all 4 pieces of our luggage lined up. She was fully dressed and ready to go. That was the first time, really, in our basically 20 years together, and the only time that she was actually ready to go anywhere before I was. I thought, maybe we'll make a habit. No. She dawdled forever after. And we got out onto the highway, and she said, you would have to be either a cowboy, a cow, or a copper miner to love that horrible town. We never went back. The moral of the story, when you're driving on a road trip, always make reservations for the hotel room ahead. I learned from that Catabasis, okay? The point is that you go somewhere, you do something, you come back, you have to figure out a way to tell it in a way that'll get the interest of other people. Otherwise, they don't remember it. Around the time that the Gilgamesh epic was written, and we'll be reading the Gilgamesh epic for next week, it goes back to a time period around 2800 BC. Nobody knew how to read and write. How many of you in this classroom know how to read and write? Is there, I'm just thought, you don't? No. I think he's asleep. It's okay. Okay. We shouldn't dismiss them as illiterate, though. A bunch of illiterates don't even know how to read and write. Nobody knew how to read and write. They just had incredibly developed memories. They had the ability to tell a story. Have you ever heard any story that you have heard 9 million times so often that you think you could have been there yourself? Does it have to do about your parents? What is your name?
Karen.
What is it about? You don't have to tell the whole story.
Well, I mean, my parents tell this story over and over and over and over and over. Like about when me and my brother were little, like.
Oh, these are the very best stories. Yes.
Well, there's just a whole bunch of them actually. Like.
And it's always you and your brother doing something really dumb, embarrassing. And they don't just say, well, this is when Karen and Bubacus, set the house on fire. Right? No, I mean, my beloved wife and her little brother actually did almost set the apartment on fire. They thought it would be fun to hide under the bed, light a candle, and pretend they were in a cave. And it was heaps of, sorry, Moopy, and it was heaps of fun until, being little kids, they did not realize that they were starting to burn the bottom of the mattress. And when I asked for Moopy's hand in marriage and all of that, I was set down and told these stories and very many more. Mr. Karen will get to hear these stories too someday. Anybody else know what kind of stories get passed around this way? And go ahead. What sort of stories get passed around your family by word of mouth so often over such a period of time, God, you almost feel like you've been there yourself?
It's usually something exciting.
Okay, what's exciting?
Well, for example, my mom got to meet Stevie Ray Vaughan.
God. These kids don't even know who Stevie Ray Vaughan or the Slits or X-Ray Specs. All right. Do you know the story of how your parents met? How many of you know the story of how your parents met? Your name is? Sierra. Was it funny?
Kind of.
I mean, you don't have to give us TMI or anything like that, but will you be able to tell it to your kids someday?
Yes.
And will you laugh and tell it to them?
Yes.
And will your kids probably think it's impossible to believe of little old white-haired granny and little old gray-haired grandpa doing this stuff?
Yes.
And will you exert every effort to tell it in a way that will bring the maximum embarrassment to your mom and dad?
Yes.
I haven't given up hope on your generation. Are you ever going to write it down?
No.
Because you know it. You've heard it so many times, you feel like you've been there, even though you probably were not there the first. Yeah, that would be kind of tough. I mean, I'm good, but I'm not that good. Any other kind of stories you know about embarrassing things? Yeah, go ahead.
The day that spur water broke and I was born.
Okay, well, tell that to the other ladies. Other, yes.
When my grandpa was in the military, my grandmother decided with her roommate in college that they were going to take naughty pictures together, but really all you could see were their legs and arms.
I want to know even less about that. But again, are you going to tell this to your little kids?
Of course.
And are you going to make it as embarrassing as possible? And the kid, oh, Mom, tell us some more about Grandma. And then he said, no, Mom, don't. Then I think maybe you can start to get the picture. When you read the Gilgamesh epic for the first time on the web page, you're going to see lots of repetition, lots of really strange details. Why are they repeating this all of the time? Well, one, because we're not writing this down. We're doing it by memory. Two, it helps us remember the story. And three, some of the details are just so awesome that you'll want to repeat them over and over and over again, just like any embarrassing story you would tell on anybody else. Okay. Also, these stories in a certain way, and this is probably the beginning to another segment, the stories we pass along traditionally by word of mouth very often represent the values, the hopes and dreams, and the accomplishments of times gone by. If it happened to me once, it happened to me a million times. When I was about an 11, 12-year-old kid, the oldest of three, my dad would say, when I was your age, I was working for a living. How many of you have heard that one? When I was your age, I was how old were you? 15? Younger? Anybody get younger?
I think my dad started working at 13.
13? 10? Oh, God. And you were getting this when you were 10 years old?
My mom just used to say all the time, well, when I was 10, I used to sell candy and make money. So I started selling candy and made money in school.
You did? Well, when I was 12, my old man said to me, well, you know, when I was 12, I was working. Get a job. So I got a job as a paper boy. And I made my own money. I bought myself a clock radio. It was really cool. It had AM and FM. And the time flipped over. It was just, my little brother, who's 11 months younger than me, hated me. He wasn't old enough to have a paper route. And I just rubbed it in. I have an alarm clock radio, and you don't. I'll take a picture of it and post it for I bought one on eBay a couple years ago. Paid like $39 for it, which is 4 times what it cost new. But I have it already. It's a way, these stories are a way of projecting values. And your mom got to you, didn't she? When she said, when I was a little 10-year-old girl, I was selling candy to make money, so you did too. Guess what? It worked. Okay, any other stories about values or stuff like that? Well, when I tried to pull that one out as a kid, my old man would have cut my head off. Ever hear that one?
Yep.
Or, you know, my mom would have kicked my butt into the next century. You're using it to project your values. You're using it to project the achievements of times gone by. And in the absence of any ability to write, well, now people just like take iTunes videos and just like, okay, crawl. Have any of you been treated to movies of some little baby just like crawling for like 5 minutes? Because mama's got an iPhone and you're going to watch it. It's terrible. They didn't have that back then. Okay. And finally, you're going to find out a whole lot about the morals, the values, and the interests of the people by reading their stories. Just a couple more things about the Gilgamesh epic, and then I'll let you go. The Gilgamesh epic is a story of alter egos. You see the word alter ego up there on the board? It is Latin for another I, another me, somebody who is almost exactly like me. The differences between alter egos are usually more interesting than the similarities. I would like you to keep an eye out for the contrast between Gilgamesh, who is the king of the city of Uruk, and Enkidu, who is a scraggly guy who lives naked out in the wild, hanging around with wild animals. Gilgamesh is the king of the city of Uruk, and he is such a jerk. But he can be a jerk because he's the king, and the gods put him there. Yes, it is. And what are the people going to do? They're going to cry out to the gods and say, "Oh, help us, great gods. You sent us this king, but no woman is safe from him. Heck, no man is safe from him. He drinks all the time and he does whatever he wants. He lords it over this town like a wild bull." And for once, the gods do something. They create this shaggy, hairy, naked, smelly too, dude named Enkidu, who lives out in the woods. He lives up in the hills. He hangs around with goats and wild animals and stuff like that. The idea is that these two alter egos are going to come into contact. Not going to give much more away than that. But I want you to keep in mind that the hero of this story, Gilgamesh, has an alter ego, another him. They're going to come into contact. There's going to be a fight. And then things are going to really start happening. That's when the story will take off. Number two, I want you to keep in mind the idea of a parable. A parable is a short story with a moral, to it. My favorite example of a parable comes from the New Testament. It's either in the book of Matthew or the back book of Luke or some other guy, where Jesus compares God's love for the human race to that of a shepherd for his flock. Probably folks in this room know it a lot better than I do. The idea is that just like the shepherd may have 100 sheep and 99 are safe in the fold, the good shepherd will go out into the pouring rain and the storm and the sleet and slosh around in the ditches trying to bring home that one extra sheep. Now, is Jesus trying to say that the universe was created by basically some dude who watches sheep 24/7? Hardly. What Jesus is suggesting is by using this parable, this illustration, he's by saying God's love is so strong that even if you are just the lowliest, scraggliest sheep and you're lost and there's a storm and it's cold, he will still come and get you. He will still come and look for you. A parable is a simple story told at no great length that supposedly should carry an important lesson to you. Now, Gilgamesh is going to get one of these parables told to him at the end of the story. It's going to be interesting to see whether he learns anything from it. Odysseus didn't learn anything from his trip to the Cyclops' cave. We'll see how Gilgamesh does. That's what I have for you today. Your assignment is to read, click on the link, and go to the link and get the Gilgamesh story. You should be able to read the whole thing over the weekend. My favorite thing for me to have you do would be to ask me questions about it, heaven forbid. But if not, I will see you on Tuesday. Thank you very much.